everybody, and welcome to an FA Cup special weekend review edition of the Total Soccer Show. My name is Taylor Rockwell. On the other end of the line, it's a man who knows all the tennis. It's Ryan Bailey. Hello, Ryan.
Hello, Tay-Tay. I do know some of the tennis. That's as far as I'll go.
So are we going total tennis show today? Is that how we're going to do it now that apparently that's taken over your entire life?
Yeah, let's talk about racket sports. To give this some context, I am covering some tennis on the other side of the world right now, and it is keeping me up and depriving me of sleep, which is fun.
Genuine question for being deprived of sleep, having to stay up late to cover an event. Would you rather cover tennis late night, or would you rather cover the FA Cup late night? Which would be more interesting to you?
FA Cup, because it's the game I like much more than tennis.
Okay, all right. But I asked that question because we are going to be talking FA Cup today. Some of the games of interest. I'm not going to say the shock upsets or anything like that because I don't think there were any too big of results. But we wanted to start with sort of the conversation that has been doing the rounds for the last, I want to say, 400 years when it comes to the FA Cup, which is how old that competition is. It's essentially, has it really lost the magic? Because we heard, I'm sure you heard growing up, I heard sort of in my 20s, the magic of the cup and how exciting it was. And I imagine there was a time when it was in a very exciting competition. These days, it doesn't feel quite like that. Ryan, do you still agree with that? That it maybe doesn't feel quite as special as it used to?
Do you know there's that moment when you're growing up when Christmas Day doesn't feel quite as spectacular as it used to?
Yes.
It's just another day at some point, isn't it? I think I've kind of reached that this year with the FA Cup because when I was a kid, I was a very big part of the narrative of the FA Cup being very magic. I think as a Wimbledon fan, when we were in the 90s, it was a huge part of our season. Some of the best games I've been to are FA Cup games. My best soccer memories, in fact, a particular game in the 96-97 season where we played Manchester United and knocked the holders of said competition out of the cup. That was one of my finest soccer memories. But I sat down on Saturday morning, fired up ESPN Plus, just scrolling through, and I just felt a bit underwhelmed. I just felt, I'm not sure which one of these or any of these I want to watch, if I'm honest. And maybe we're spoiled. We've been spoiled because we've had a lot of festive fixtures to deal with and a lot of high-quality entertainment in the past few weeks. And I just felt a little bit like, I don't really fancy any of these matchups. I know the big teams in this competition are going to be fielding weakened sides. I know it's going to be scrappy and there's going to be some ploughed fields I'm going to have to look at. And then you look at when you flick around these games, Taylor, you look at the stadiums there. There was footage from Birmingham and from Swansea where they had one stand open. Even the fans aren't going along. One of my best friends at home is a Millwall fan. And I was texting him during the Millwall game. I was watching it. I was saying, so can I see you? Because there's about 10 people in this stadium right now. And he was like, no, I'm at home. I was like, why? He said, I never go to the third round of the FA Cup. I was like, okay, this guy's a season ticket holder who goes to every game. He doesn't even bother show up to the third round anymore. He'll maybe only go when Millwall, his team, who have never been a Premier League team, only when it gets a bit spicier in this competition. So I don't know. How do you feel about it? Am I just being a bit of a grouch about this?
No, I don't think so. And I want to get into sort of why maybe it's lost some of the luster, why it's not quite the appointment TV that maybe it was before, or appointment in-person viewing experience. But I wanted to go back to your initial point about what it was for you, because I think for a lot of Americans who obviously did not grow up supporting a lower level team, a lot of people tend to pick a team that resonates with them for whatever reason. Those tend to be the ones on TV. So you have a lot of people who like Premier League teams, maybe some teams who've been relegated out. But you, Ryan, are coming from a unique experience of kind of supporting a team that has been up and down, has had highs and lows.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, why was it so special for you growing up? Why did you have that sort of memory of the FA Cup? What was it that for people who maybe have never been to an FA Cup game or certainly never been to a game when the FA Cup still sort of really mattered to people, why was it this unique experience?
I think for a team like Wimbledon, who I support, we've always had an underdog mentality, and I think when you get lower league teams who come up against big teams in this competition, that's what it is. It's the underdog. There's no bigger thrill like the game I mentioned, knocking the holders of the FA Cup out of the FA Cup when you're a tiny team like Wimbledon. And I get that I'm being grouchy about this because we're spoilt with watching top flight soccer, particularly in this country where we can watch as much as we like. But think of a Rochdale fan. They're struggling in League One. They might get relegated. They're battling with Wimbledon to get relegated, in fact, at the moment. And, taking Newcastle to a draw and getting a second leg out of that second leg could pay their wage bill for a year. That's huge for them, and it's huge for those fans. But I know that's just the other side of the coin, I guess. And I've forgotten the original question now, but
No, just why it was like, what that atmosphere was like, why it felt so special to you as a youngster. And I feel like you've given us a good picture.
Yeah, I think it was the underdog thing, but also the FA Cup was special. It just felt a bit more special, and I think a lot of it was FA Cup final day. It was appointment viewing. It really was appointment viewing. It was. The whole day was dedicated to it. The BBC coverage of the tournament, of the final, at Wembley would start at like 8 a.m. for a 3 p.m. kickoff. They drag it out. It was such a huge day. Nothing else happened on that day, that weekend even. And now, when a few years back when they started doing it at, say, a 5:30 kickoff and they had another slate of games on the same day, it just diminished it, I think. And I think slowly we've seen it sort of ebb away in terms of importance. And that's kind of sad, I suppose, but it's also progress.
Yeah, I mean, I think... why do you say it's progress?
I don't know. Money's driving things towards other things, I suppose. And you look at, say like Newcastle, who always flub in this competition, and they know darn well they're not going to devote too much energy to it because it doesn't make them any money. Right. All that makes them money is finishing mid-table and staying in the Premier League. They don't care about these ancillary cup competitions. And I think there's going to be more and more attitudes like that, where it's important for the Rochdales of this world, but not very important for the middling to lower top flight sides.
That makes sense to me, because those middling to lower, like League One teams who still found a way to get results this weekend aren't going to have a lot of the opportunities that that Premier League clubs have. And even those Premier League clubs who have the opportunity to play in the Europa League tend to treat that as a burden rather than a possibility, because it means fixture congestion. It means you're playing a lot more minutes. It means it's a lot of travel. But it also means you can't necessarily focus on the domestic competition where you need to stay in order to continue to make massive amounts of money off of that TV contract. So I think you're always going to kind of have this situation now of Premier League teams, especially like top 10 or so, top half of the table teams, that like, we had this question last week, forgive me for jumping around a little bit, but we had this question last week about like, who's the biggest team that could conceivably get relegated in the next 5 years? And Daryl and I thought about it for a while, and kind of the answer was basically Arsenal. The teams that you'd kind of expect. I mean, because even Arsenal, though, like, they could have a terrible season, but you bring in a new manager, you get a little bit of a bounce, you kind of do some basic stuff, you're going to have a deep enough squad to make your way through to at least finishing top half. And so I think you look at the FA Cup, and these teams are kind of in that same position of we can play kind of younger kids who will maybe get the job done, and if they don't, they don't. We hopefully avoid a replay. But if they do, then that's great, and we're kind of bringing more young players through. But I think you're going to have those kind of top half teams don't need to play their best teams, and they can still do okay. But simultaneously, if they're not playing their best teams, then you're not going to have that sort of, we knocked Manchester United out of this cup competition. It means so much to us, and that statement in of itself is sort of a bygone era. But like, we knocked out Man City. Maybe that doesn't matter as much if you're a top half championship team and you're playing Man City's reserves. Same goes for Liverpool. So I think as long as you have the bigger clubs definitely publicly, obviously devaluing it by not playing their strongest 11s, and I understand why they won't, it automatically has that feel of like, okay, so this is not quite as important. Still certainly more important than the League Cup, but definitely not as much as it used to seem.
Yeah, definitely not. And I think you can even trace that death knell of the FA Cup for the bigger teams back to 20 years ago, back to Manchester United. Remember that season after they won the treble where they decided not to enter the FA Cup because they wanted to do the Club World Cup instead, which I think you can probably do both, but they decided that was their approach. And I think ever since then, there's always been this inkling that it's not as important a competition. And you mentioned there about replays, and that's something that's going to come up because we've got a few replays coming up, and with Wolves, Man United as well. I think neither side needs a replay out of that. Look at Wolves in particular. They've already got a Europa League campaign to deal with, and it's just they haven't got the deepest squad in the league. So to compete in the league and to have that competition and another an extra fixture on the schedule is not great. So I suggest there may be some changes coming to this competition if it is to survive as a top class competition.
Yeah, I think we had some people asking about that on Twitter, and I think Daryl was pointing out there was once like a 6 replay festivity where they just kept having to go back and forth. I can't imagine that really is going to be a thing that people ever want to have.
Well, they used to replay the final as well, didn't they?
Exactly, yeah.
And so they had a final on a weekday at Hillsborough. It was a bit underwhelming.
Wow. Yeah, so I feel like maybe we'll move towards like just a direct penalty shootout at some point in order to like get these games down. Maybe that's just what the FA Cup should be. It should just be automatic shootouts, and that's how you advance. And then nobody gets fatigued. You can put your best takers in. I think I've solved this, Ryan.
oh, what if we just didn't play the competition at all, or any soccer, and we all just got on with our lives and did something else?
Okay, that's a possibility. That's a possibility. Now you may have, maybe you've wandered into the cynical take era.
I'm talking us out of a job here as well, to be fair.
Well, let's stick with that Wolves-Man United game for a moment, because it was, even for me, a Man United fan, going back and watching, I told Daryl this, I somehow thought it was on Sunday afternoon, so I was all ready, and then the game had already happened, so that was confusing for me. But going back and watching, it was tough. It was not a fun game. There were a couple highlight moments on both sides. I think Man United, like the biggest highlight for them, which is actually quite a low light, is not putting a shot on frame. And I know for you, this sort of was, having already talked about Man United and what it meant to beat them in the past, maybe not quite such an impressive feat this time around?
Yeah, definitely not. And I think that's a big part of it that I think gave Wolves an advantage here. Manchester United aren't feared anymore.
No, and I guess I should clarify, I'm talking about this as though Man United managed to lose again to Wolves. They did not. It was the 0-0 draw. But
they lost 0-0.
It's still, exactly, because they have the replay and because it was a kind of underwhelming performance against a team that have been a bogey team for them. But yeah, it still sort of did not seem like, okay, teams are sort of fearing this club anymore.
Yeah, definitely not. And by the way, the only thing I can think of worse than watching this game live as I did is watching it on replay as you did. So I feel bad for you there. I thought that the soccer gods were punishing us for having to sit through this one. That maybe has affected my mood and the opening gambit of this podcast as well, to be fair. But United were terrible. I think I saw a stat saying that it's the first time since 2015 they haven't had a shot on target in a domestic game. Obviously, an inexperienced front line here and a lot of inexperience throughout the team as well. Harry Maguire, he has some experience, but doesn't seem to be using it terribly well
Not so much.
in recent games. I don't know. Does this inspire you at all as a Manchester United supporter?
I mean, they didn't lose to Wolves, so that's a start. They tend to do that.
They haven't beaten them, was it 5 games and haven't beaten them yet in the last 5?
I believe so. So, I mean, I guess that could be a positive, but no, I think the kind of... I'll go on the personal Man United rant for a moment and just say that, like, this season has been a lot of, like, one step forward and maybe, like, 1 to 1.5 steps back. And so every time it feels like there's progress being made, you have games like this in which there's not a lot of cohesion in the attack. There don't seem to be new ideas. There don't seem to be sort of second, third, fourth plans for when the game is sort of potentially there or potentially needs to be seen out. It just was kind of representative of the way things have been under Solskjaer, but under a lot of different managers for Manchester United the past few years. So yeah, I'm not surprised to see the team that look like a more cohesive, organized unit with a plan. No, they don't win. This would be Wolves. But I think for sort of a game in which Nuno definitely seemed to have that vibe of like, yeah, I mean, it's exciting to play Man United and it's the FA Cup, but also we got to focus on other things. I think he probably wanted to avoid the replay too, but kind of having that mentality and being able to have that mentality, I guess a club like Manchester United is a sign of where things are, both for Wolves and for United.
Yeah, I think it's a frustrating thing about this game as well, is because I don't think we can learn an awful lot from it. Because Wolves made 4 changes, United made 7. It doesn't feel like this fits in the form book. It doesn't. It's not Wolves Man United canon. This game.
All
frankly,
right. I'm fine with that. We can have it stricken from the record. There will be other games that I think people will not want to have removed from the record. One of those would be the Merseyside Derby FA Cup tie, which went to Liverpool. Liverpool with a 1-0 win over Everton. And I think we've both got some thumbs for this game, as we intermittently do. But I think the kind of resounding narrative of children versus men and children winning is pretty accurate here.
Yeah, Bill Shankly, the famous Bill Shankly, said this city has 2 great teams, Liverpool and Liverpool reserves, and nowhere was this more clear than in this matchup, with a lot of kids obviously coming out for Liverpool in this one, and Everton still having a pretty much a full-strength team on offer. The stat here, Liverpool starting lineup costs £43 million, Everton's £222 million, and this isn't a dig on Everton as much as it is a credit to Jurgen Klopp, who gets a massive, massive thumbs up for this, because the fact that he can inspire more chemistry in this team than Carlo Ancelotti can get out of a full-strength Everton team. And this is a Carlo Ancelotti who's had a lot of success against Liverpool with Napoli in recent years. That says a lot about Jurgen Klopp. And I've got a quote here from Dion Dublin, former Manchester United striker DM Dublin, who compared Jurgen Klopp to Sir Alex Ferguson. And he says, by that I mean that he's running the club from top to bottom. He's making sure the academy football's being played the same as the first team. When they come through, they know their jobs and they know where to be, who to listen to. And I think that's important because that speaks to how Jurgen Klopp can take a team like this and get such a good result, despite a lot of them being youth players and having less chemistry than his normal starting 11.
Yeah, and I think if you look at like those two coaches for a moment, you've got Klopp, you've got Ancelotti, and Ancelotti is sort of the old school or older school type coach who I think sort of doesn't necessarily concern himself with all that's going on in the locker room. The quote that I saw out of context, but still, was him saying like, I guess I'm going to have to or I'm going to talk to these players after the game. It's not what I usually do, but like some words need to be had, something along those lines. But just the idea that he wouldn't have otherwise like talked to his players seems like the polar opposite of Jurgen Klopp, who is never not hugging someone, it seems, is always sort of cheering people on, pushing his players to do more, to do better, to be better. And I think it absolutely resonates so that when you have a team of youngsters who, what the average age was 5 years younger than their Everton counterparts, lots of teenagers in there, James Milner has to be subbed off, on comes more teenagers, that they're able to sort of still play the same system and more impressively grow into the game, because it certainly could have been like 3 or 4-0 to Everton at one point. Everton missed some chances, should have done much better, and then I think really kind of because of those misses gave Liverpool some momentum. But the hunting in packs, the playing together, the taking their chances, it was all sort of things we've seen from Liverpool this season. It was really similar to the Liverpool senior team of you find a way to win, you grind the result. Maybe it's a moment of like beauty as it was in this game. Maybe it's a fortunate VAR call that didn't necessarily happen in this one, but just sort of the way Liverpool ended up getting this result felt very familiar to the way they've gotten results this entire season.
Yeah, definitely. And I think this was a huge missed opportunity for Everton. I have to give them a thumbs down for this one, because they had some great chances, as you say, in the first half to get to get a result. There could have been a couple of goals up, were it not for Adrian, who put in a superb performance. His legs seem to be doing a really good shift in saving a lot of shots in this one. And, you know, this, as I say, this is a huge opportunity. Ancelotti knows his record against Liverpool. He had a much stronger side on paper relative to Liverpool here, and it's just they didn't take advantage of it at all. They were up to absolutely nothing basically in the second half, and it was pretty poor. Wasn't much link-up play going on. It just seemed like, well, I think Alan Shearer said on BBC, he said there was times in the second half when Dominic Calvert-Lewin, he flicked it on and there was no one within 40 or 50 yards of him. It's kind of true, isn't it? It just seemed like a pretty disjointed performance from him. And you mentioned about Ancelotti having to have a word with them in the locker room afterwards. If I was him, I would have gone a bit Ramsay Bolton, Game of Thrones, and just shut them all in a room with Duncan Ferguson for an hour. That'd be torture.
I mean, I forgot that deleted scene when Duncan Ferguson is involved with Ramsay Bolton, but I'm going to have to go back and look.
He inspired the character. You do know that, right?
That's a way to go. And maybe that is what Everton require, because it does seem like this club are still in a sort of lackluster, lack of motivation period, and more than anything don't seem to have that confidence to really back themselves to, when things don't quite go their way, to find a way to get a goal, to find a way to make something happen, to be able to kind of pull themselves back in. Again, it really just added out to me how dominant Everton were for those first 30 or so minutes, and then how it just kind of completely flipped. And that's not what I would have expected in a game that featured a lot of youngsters and a lot of changes for Liverpool versus a more or less senior team for Everton. For it to go the way it did definitely has to be disconcerting for the blue side of Liverpool. For the red side, I think maybe things even rosier than they already were, just because you did have, in addition to the youngsters playing, you had Adam Lallana playing a big role here. You had Minamino making his I believe his debut for Liverpool and looking just fine.
Yeah, he was good. He had 22 passes attempted, 18 completed, 17 passes in the opposition half. He had a shot, and I think he had that header that he nearly connected with as well. He was pretty good. I was impressed with him. I thought Lallana was fantastic. He was absolutely running that midfield, wasn't he? But let's give a credit to players, a thumbs up to players we'd never heard of before this weekend, but who are now household names. Curtis Jones getting that goal in the 71st minute. What a banger. Can you imagine being a Liverpool youth prospect, grown up in Liverpool, and you get your debut at Anfield in the Merseyside Derby, and you score the winner with basically the most perfect possible shot you could take from that position in the field? There's no better way to hit it than the way he did.
No, there's not.
What a time.
And it's worth noting, like, the way he's calling for it, the way he's gesturing, the way he shapes to shoot. He knows what he's doing the whole time. So maybe it is a thing that he'd practiced in his mind so many times that he just saw that moment and lived it expertly. But no, I cannot imagine. I mean, I can imagine because, yes, that was like the daydream of scoring the game-winning goal. Somehow there was always like as the clock expired. I don't know how that would always work in my fantasy. This one, not quite that way. But just the goal itself, the way it tings off the underside of the bar, the way he hits it from distance and gets the bend on it, it is a phenomenal goal. And now you just have to hope that he kind of continues to do that if you're a Liverpool fan, as opposed to sort of those one-hit wonders, that goal that then maybe we don't hear anything from him for like 4 more years until he's like on loan at Tranmere or playing for Tranmere or something like that. So let's hope that doesn't happen with Curtis Jones.
I saw a headline from Curtis Jones who was interviewed, and it was words to the effect of, I get really frustrated and I really need Jurgen Klopp to give me more minutes. And I was thinking, you're 18. You're trying to get into the best team in the world. Settle down, Curtis Jones. You're going to get your moment. I thought he was very good. And also, I'd like to give a shout out to Harvey Elliott as well. I thought it was really, really good young talent as well. There was a particular moment, I think, in the first half where he sort of cut a ball inside to Origi along the floor, and it was an unconventional way of getting the ball to him on the floor, and Origi had a really good effort from it as well. And I thought it was, lovely, lovely soccer.
So more good times for Liverpool, fewer good times for Everton. We're going to continue to talk FA Cup as well as some action in Spain, some action in Italy. But first, Ryan, we should talk a little bit about today's sponsor, our friends at HelloFresh, America's #1 meal kit. You can get mouth-watering seasonal recipes and pre-measured ingredients delivered right to your door with HelloFresh.
Yes, you can indeed. They cut out the stressful meal planning and prepping so you can enjoy cooking and get dinner on the table in just 30 minutes or even 20 minutes with their quick recipe options. You a 20-minute guy or a 30-minute guy, Taylor? How do you feel?
I think I tend to slow it down, so I feel like I'm a 30-minute cooker, even though I would prefer to be faster. But I guess I slow it down. I take my time. I couldn't do like the Jurgen Klopp style of cooking, which I feel like is very intense, very all over the place, but somehow it ends up working. And I think that works for Jurgen Klopp. If that doesn't work for you, then you can break out of your dinner rut with HelloFresh's 22+ seasonal chef-curated recipes each week. So if you are sort of trying to stick with the resolution, eat better, cook more, have better ingredients, whatever you want to go with, HelloFresh can do all of those things.
HelloFresh has more 5-star recipes than any other meal kits. You know you get something delicious. By the way, a little stat they've thrown in here. The average trip to the grocery store takes 41 minutes. Not when you've got little kids, I might add. That's over 35 hours a year if you go once a week. And the source of that stat is the Time Institute. What is the Time Institute, Taylor? What do they do?
I guess they just time all things all the time. I hope that is a place where you can just submit, like, it took me 7 minutes to get to work today, and then that's the official time for that day from now on.
Noted.
I also, 41 minutes seems short to me. I don't think, short of going in with a list of, 3 things and really sticking to that list, I can't think of a time I've spent fewer than, 40 minutes in a grocery store, and that's just being in there. That's not including the drive. So HelloFresh definitely does save you, and I imagine it also saves your budget, because if you're like me, you wander around the aisles, you add some stuff to the cart, suddenly you've spent considerably more than you meant to. So if you don't want to do that, instead, if you want HelloFresh to send those meals right to your door, you can do that, and they're now basically $5.66 per serving, which is a decent value. So Ryan, if people want to check out HelloFresh, see what they have on offer, take advantage of things, how can they do so?
Oh, well, what you do, Taylor, is you go to hellofresh.com/TSS10. That's hellofresh.com/TSS10. Use the code TSS10 during HelloFresh's New Year sale for 10 free meals, including shipping. We're already saying these meals only cost $5.66 per serving. You're going to get 10 free on top of that, baby. Woohoo! What can you ask? And, no more trips to the grocery store. Wonderful. Love it.
So go to hellofresh.com/TSS10. Use code TSS10 during HelloFresh's New Year's sale for 10 free meals, including free shipping. Thank you very much to HelloFresh for sponsoring our episode, our FA Cup review episode. Plus
thanks to the Time Institute too, by the way.
And the Time Institute, of course. We must always appreciate the Time Institute, which does sound slightly sinister, but I'm going to assume is not. I very much enjoyed Rochdale's 1-1 draw with Newcastle. This game was interesting and fascinating and confusing in lots of different ways. Rochdale near the bottom of League One. Newcastle missing, I believe, 10 outfield players. There were some twists and turns. There were lots and lots of misses. Joe Linton could have had at least 2, as could Rochdale midfielder Ollie Rathbone, who had a great chance to seal this one, but couldn't take it at the very end. He had a couple more chances, but had a very good game overall. Ryan, what were your takeaways from this one? What did you find particularly interesting?
Firstly, the most interesting thing is these teams had never played before.
That was strange, right?
In the history of soccer, they had no head-to-head history. I thought, that's bizarre. How Newcastle never played Rochdale before? Amazing. Newcastle get relegated all the time. You'd think they'd meet. Anyway, one thing I did learn is, obviously, Rochdale, as I mentioned, are in a League One relegation battle with my team, AFC Wimbledon. We beat Rochdale 3-2 earlier this season. Therefore, we're better than Newcastle, so we've established that. That's
Perfect.
Good. I'm not sure Joe Linton will get into the Wimbledon side at the moment.
Oh, my goodness.
He did not have a good game, did he?
No. At a time when, Christian Atsu came in, destroyed the Rochdale defense, forced a substitution inside the first 30 minutes, I believe, because his defender was getting absolutely shredded. He looked very dominant. Miguel Almiron scores again, I believe subs off with injury, so there are concerns there. Newcastle already having lots of injury issues, but Almiron able to get a goal, able to continue to play well. Joe Linton looked the way Joe Linton has looked this season, and I don't really understand what is happening or why. Maybe it is just the lack of form, and once you don't have form, you don't have confidence. Once you don't have confidence, you're never going to take your chances particularly cleanly. But as I said, he could have had at least 3 goals in this one, or 2, maybe 3 goals in this one.
3.
Instead, nothing.
I'd say 3, and the critics can say, or the counter-argument is that he's being asked to be a number 9, and that's not necessarily what he is. But on the same time, if I'm being paid a lot of money to play soccer, I would want my shot not to be a pathetic P-roller that goes 3 yards wide of the bar from inside the box. Wide of the post, sorry. There was a really pathetic-looking shot that, even in a rec league, you go, come on, you got to put that on target. There was sort of that, he had this sort of really soft shot on the turn. It's like he just doesn't hit the ball very hard.
Yeah.
That's what I've noticed about him.
Yeah, which is to your point, yes, if you're playing a player out of position, if they're fundamentally not sure what's being after them or how to do it, it's going to lead to some confusion. But that he's had as much time as he's had, as many games as he's had, and still cannot find a way to really get things going. It makes me, I really was watching this game thinking, is he just bad? Is this one of those situations when a player just hit the right form, got this move, and then suddenly it fell off? Or is he one who maybe just the system with Newcastle doesn't fit him? I don't have an answer for you, but I don't really understand why things have gone the way they have for him.
Yeah, it's very odd, isn't it? And let's give some credit to Aaron Wilbraham, by the way. Rochdale, they put in a great performance here. They had loads of good chances. You say they nearly wrapped it up with a winner at the end. But Aaron Wilbraham is 40 years old.
He is.
As we've established there. He is only 5 years older than Sean and 5 years younger than Sean and Matty Longstaff's dad.
Wow. Oh, that's ridiculous and amazing. That was amazing. He scores the equalizer. I do love that the assist comes from Luke Matheson, who's 16 years old, I believe has been with Rochdale his entire career. But for him, 16-year-old, to kind of play in a great ball for a 40-year-old to finish. And Matheson did look very, very good. I thought he was really impressive in this game. Wilbraham taking his chance, doing well there. But the assist from Matheson had me thinking, that might be a player that we see get a move sometime in the next year or so to a maybe slightly larger club.
Yeah, 56-year-old combined goal there from assist and scoring. That averages out.
Yeah, that does. All right, yeah, that does average out. What are your expectations for the replay of this one? Because it is, as I said, Newcastle. I think Almiron subs out with injury, Muto as well. So their current injury list, I think, is now at 12 outfield players, maybe 12 players total. How do you think they deal with this return leg, especially given that with the injuries they have, I also feel like there's a chance that they could be in a bit of a relegation scrap fairly soon. Do you think we see kind of more of the same from them, of a combination reserve squad and Premier League team? Do you think we see a dominant team because they want to get some sort of momentum going, or is it going to be entirely experimental?
All logic dictates that Newcastle should win this at home against Rochdale, doesn't it? Yep. I think, as I touched on at the top of the show, Rochdale can treat this as a payday. They'll get half the gate receipts from St James's Park. That's going to be huge for them. Yep. As I say, that will easily pay their wage bill for the year.
Provided all the stands are open, yes.
Provided they are. I mean, even when Newcastle were dire, the fans do turn up to their credit. So I think they should be okay there. As for Newcastle and their form, and I still think they'll probably get through this game begrudgingly because they don't like, as I mentioned, they don't really like these cup competitions. But they're winless in the last 4 games. They're 5 points from safety in the league. I'm not worried about them getting relegated because I still think there's probably 3 worse teams, and I think we've seen enough good performances from the Steve Bruce side this season to show that they can pull themselves out of it. Are you on board with that?
Yeah, I think that makes a decent amount of sense to me. So I take your point there, and I think it's a solid point. Well done, Ryan Bailey. While we're talking about teams that can be happy with some of the results, we should talk about some other big games here. I'd say Fulham with a 2-1 win over Aston Villa. Scott Parker in charge there. I think for American fans of Fulham to see them sort of beating a Premier League team, maybe a sign that Fulham have sort of righted the ship from where they were at this time last year.
Sorry, I was drinking. Yes, I agree.
Any other results stand out to you, Ryan?
Yeah, can we have a little talk about Middlesbrough against Spurs? This was a result I wasn't expecting. Middlesbrough being coached by Jonathan Woodgate, he who scored the winning goal the last time Spurs won a trophy, the League Cup in 2008. This was a pretty strong starting 11 for Tottenham. I don't think they had really an excuse for not getting a result here. It wasn't a terrible performance. I thought there was some good stuff going on here. They just weren't very aggressive in the final third. Harry Winks doing his sideways passes special. But Jose Mourinho got the opportunity in to have a complaint about we're playing without a striker. We've played with 6 attacking strikers but no striker, he said. Don't understand that quote, but okay, Jose. Sort of sketching over the fact that Lucas Moura, who looked pretty dangerous in this game, could probably fill the role, and he's got Heung-min Son as well. He's just trying to call out for some transfer budget here. But at the same time, Jonathan Woodgate, he had Paddy McNair playing centre-back. Louis van Gaal's Man United's Paddy McNair, I believe.
You are correct.
Out of position. I think he had another midfielder in defence as well. So they had some injury issues, possibly more so than Tottenham. So I think that negates Mourinho's excuses a little bit. And as always, Serge Aurier is the villain here. 88th minute, he had a horrible miss he put into Rosie that could have won it and could have got us all to carry on with the rest of our lives instead of having a replay.
It does feel like a weekly segment we could do of like Serge Aurier makes a mistake. We could probably talk about that. We could probably talk about Robbie Keane being an assistant for Middlesbrough. Did not know that until
I didn't know that.
I saw his shocked face when Middlesbrough equalized, went ahead. He kind of turned and looked at Gareth Southgate, or not Gareth Southgate. That would be very, very wrong. Jonathan Woodgate. Too many Gates in your England teams.
We know that Middlesbrough was his boyhood club. He's loved since he was
there. Of course. He did a lot of team supporting when he was a kid. I guess if you actually are just a fair weather fan as a child, you technically did support them as your boyhood club. So I guess it works. So maybe just jump around a lot, and you can say that with a straight face if you need to.
Sure, but you don't need to.
But you don't need to. Also worth maybe mentioning very briefly, Crystal Palace losing at home a 1-0 loss to Derby County. Derby County with Wayne Rooney playing as a deep-lying midfielder. Dwayne Holmes does come in, almost gets an assist near the end of this one, which would have made me very happy. But Wayne Rooney, it's sort of like, it didn't fly under the radar at all, but it just sort of like, oh yeah, he's going to Derby, he's going to be like, I guess, a player coach or something like that. And it just sort of took until watching him to realize like, oh no, that's a really big deal, because Derby are kind of the launch pad for Frank Lampard. It feels like they're kind of happy to roll the dice and try some things when it comes to managers and coaches. And it feels like this role really suits him, of kind of sitting in, he can dictate play. The Match of the Day folk kept calling him a quarterback, and it does seem like that's kind of the role he's going to take for Derby. And it seems like thus far it has worked out. So I'm excited to see more of him in the limited amounts that we will with Derby being in the championship. Currently 17th in the championship as well. So unlikely we see them getting promoted anytime soon. They're 1 point behind Middlesbrough. But still, to get the result against Crystal Palace, even with Crystal Palace getting a red card, I think it's still a point of pride and a thing that Derby will be more than a little pleased about.
A point of Pride Park.
Yeah, nice. There we go. Yeah, it all connects. Any other FA Cup drama? Any other FA Cup games you want to talk about?
I think I've had my fill.
I feel like you had your fill about 5 minutes into the show, but we it's always fun to find the interesting things. Rochdale really were the team that sort of I wanted to watch more of and learn more about. They were super fun. But there was some fun, lots of goals in La Liga. Let's talk all things La Liga, which is to say all things Real Madrid and Barcelona. You want to start with Real Madrid getting all 3 points with 3 goals, or do you want to go to the Barcelona derby?
Why don't we start with the Madrid
Catalonian derby? Yeah.
Yeah, we've got the Madrid one, of course. Getafe
of course.
Real Madrid. Real Madrid getting the 3-0 win at Getafe. Real Madrid now undefeated in 14 games. Thibaut Courtois played a blinder in this one.
Yes, he did.
I don't think there's any dispute that Real Madrid are the best team in Spain right now. And despite the shortcomings we've seen this season, despite certain players not firing, and despite doubts over Zinedine Zidane's capabilities, they're doing good. Well
they
done.
are. And the result, coupled with Barcelona's draw, which we're obviously going to talk about, brings them to 40 points, level at the top of the table with Barcelona. Barcelona have the superior goal difference by 2, but then also have the head-to-head. Or no, they don't have the head-to-head, do they? Because that one finished goalless. So we shall see how the rest of the season plays out. But things are very well poised for a dramatic run. And when you say they're the best team in La Liga, are you saying essentially like based on form and the way things seem to be going? Because they've got the 2 wins, they've got a couple draws in there, but I do believe Barcelona with roughly the same record over the last 5 games. So what is it about Madrid that you think puts them a little bit ahead of Barca?
They're not terrible to watch.
All right.
I mean, that's not a quantifiable way of making them better technically, but they are not terrible to watch compared to Barcelona, who are just sort of they're still a bit turgid under Valverde, aren't they?
They really are, and we'll talk about that one. First, I just wanted to say I want to give thumbs up to Federico Valverde for being unselfish for Madrid's 3rd goal. He's played in on the break, and then he does the FIFA goal of pulls the goalkeeper out, kind of slots it with the outside of his foot over to Luka Modric, who gets the 3rd goal while getting tackled, but still finishes. But it really thumbs up to Luka Modric because this is very late in the game. Madrid already 2-0 up. You'd forgive Luka Modric if he had kind of stayed deep, sat back, didn't really press himself to get forward to be involved in this goal because they're already ahead. That he puts in that level of energy to stay ahead of his defender, to be there when the ball comes across, I think it deserves a thumbs up for sure.
I think very generous of Valverde. I bet he takes his HelloFreshes nice and slow as well.
All right, well, let's talk Valverde for a moment because we have Espanyol 2, Barcelona 2, Espanyol hosting and not necessarily winning the Catalan derby, but I think with the way things were when they went 1-0 ahead, then Barcelona able to pull it back in the 50th, 59th minutes with goals from Suarez and Vidal. It felt like in that moment, like, oh, we've seen this before. They're going to add one more. Messi will score one of his Messi goals. This is going to finish 3-1. Instead, Wu Lei comes in, Chinese international, in the 88th minute, gets the equalizer, and it does pile on the pressure for Ernesto Valverde, who, as I saw today, I think now suddenly we're starting to see a lot more conversation about Pochettino again, and how there still are questions about his connection to Espanyol and would that factor, but that sort of, it sounds like some obstacles have been cleared for potentially appointing Pochettino. I still don't think it happens, but it does seem like this result, to your point, has maybe reminded people that Barcelona aren't the most fun to watch, and maybe they would be a little bit more fun with somebody else in charge.
Yeah, have you heard about the Poch parallels in this game as well?
No.
So, obviously, coming into this game, Espanyol fired their coach before the winter break, and Abelardo Fernandez was in charge with the team in the relegation zone. And when Pochettino was at Espanyol, when he faced Barcelona in the 2008-09 season, they were also in the relegation zone, and they also got a draw. There's some parallels going on.
Right,
so what we're saying is that Fernandez is the new Pochettino, and he's going to be fantastic, and he's going to get a job at Tottenham sometime soon. But
all right, I look forward to that.
This is I thought it was a very entertaining game. I did not expect the result to go the way it did. I thought this was pretty much a gimme for Barcelona because they have a good record against Espanyol. They have a good record at the RCD Stadium, although they did lose in the Copa del Rey a couple seasons ago. And I just expected this to be a bit of a walkover. But this was one of those games where it's a nice reminder that when Leo Messi doesn't fancy it, Barcelona don't get up for it, basically. And I mean, even Luis Suarez didn't look like he was up for it for most of this game, and there was some interesting stuff going on in this game with the tactics. And but Wu Lei, by the way, I thought his goal was very good. That lovely first touch, and it seemed to be that goal came from Jordi Alba being drawn out of position, and he was involved in both of Barcelona's goals, but was at fault for that equaliser too. So an interesting game for him. And I think I'm right in saying that Wu Lei is kind of considered the Chinese Messi. He was kind of signed with a marketing angle as well. He came from Shanghai SPI PG, where he has 169 goals, all-time top scorer for them. So he needs a second Chinese player in the league as well. Interesting stuff.
So, a good goal from him. He celebrates minimally, which had me momentarily thinking, like, is he a former Barca player or something? But I think it was just kind of the occasion maybe overwhelmed him.
Yeah.
So credit to him. And again, as I said, credit to Espanyol for that fight back. But you're right that, like, with a lot of what you're saying, it does speak to certain vulnerabilities that have not been there with Barcelona previously. So Jordi Alba is always going to be a very, very attacking player. He's always going to be pivotal in what Barcelona are trying to do, especially when they're trying to hit on the break. But normally, when you have Barcelona that are the well-oiled machine Barcelona, there's people filling in for him. He doesn't necessarily get caught out, even when he's far forward, because there's cover. And I think little moments like there not being cover in this game that leads to the goal, that to me stands out. That you don't see the kind of fluidity of passing and moving. You have it decently well for the Luis Suarez goal. It's a great ball in. He finishes with the instep in a way that doesn't seem possible, but he somehow finds a way to do because he's Luis Suarez and very good at that. But aside from that, like even the go-ahead goal for Barcelona scored by Arturo Vidal, it's an amazing sort of Trivela cross from Luis Suarez, but it's a moment
outside of the boot. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, but it's a moment of like individual brilliance and skill and awareness that, like, I don't know how to explain the difference here, but when it's a pass sequence and then he does that and, like, splits two defenders, but Messi was already running off the ball and it ends up in a goal, it feels like, oh, this is a rehearsed thing. This is a thing they've practiced. This is Barcelona kind of in their free-flowing, connected, good chemistry attack. Here, that it's Suarez sort of like having to figure it out and kind of improvise something. It's a great bit of skill, and thumbs up to him for pulling it off. But it felt more like he spotted somebody and he managed to make that happen and it ends in a goal. It didn't feel like, oh, this is a whole connected system and style of play. So I agree with you that even as they're scoring goals, it still doesn't quite like slam the door the way a 20-pass sequence ending in a Leo Messi turn and shoot from like a tight angle but knowing exactly where he is, that would have felt more like, oh, okay, we see the kind of juggernaut kicking into gear. Instead, we didn't really see that as much, and you're absolutely right. A big part of that was Lionel Messi. Like, I think one of his best chances was a header, and like, yes, he can score with his head, but that's not what you think of when it comes to what you don't want Leo Messi doing if you're an opposition team. I think you're more than happy to settle for him getting some headed chances as opposed to him dribbling in the box. Yeah,
he just plain didn't look that bothered in this game, I think. And I'll expand a little bit on what I said about Suarez as well, because he's one of those players where, particularly in this instance, if you only watch the highlights, if you watch 3 minutes, he looks amazing. And he does all his little touches like that cross and stuff. But if you watch a full game, he's pretty inconsistent. There's lots of poor touches. There's loads of him just walking around, not looking terribly interested. And I know when you see Messi walking around not looking terribly interested, he's probably surveying and scanning everyone Terminator style, and he's going to do something amazing in a few minutes. But it didn't happen in this one. And I just thought it looked a little bit disjointed up there. And also when De Jong got the red card, Valverde, he took off Griezmann, who was working pretty hard up there. Would another manager have had the stones to take off a Suarez or a Messi? So you've got your hardest working forward still on the field, do a 4-4-1, and you still got someone who'll track back, because Messi and Suarez aren't tracking back, which is something you kind of might need when you're a man down. Yeah. And they paid the price because they conceded an equaliser.
Oh, yeah, I should have mentioned that. Thank you for that. Frankie de Jong getting his second yellow for a professional foul. He knew it was coming. As soon as he did it, you could see him sort of be like, oh, that's going to be a problem. And
it was a silly one as well.
Yes, it was. But, man, it's really interesting. You're totally right about Suarez. And I think a big thing is that his game is sort of built on margins. Not that he is marginal, but it's built on sort of knowing exactly where he needs to be, or like he'll stand 5 yards offside knowing exactly how much the defense is going to drop when the ball is played in. And I think he gambles a little bit. And I think if you have a team that are sort of know, like, okay, so Luis is going to be doing this run at this time, I know when to play it, and they play him in at the exact right moment, it really works, and it suddenly puts him in acres of space. I do think that first goal is a little bit of that. It's a sign that it's still there. It's just when it's a little bit slowed down, maybe that midfielder takes a touch or two, they're not playing it in first time or second time or even third time, then suddenly, instead of being perfectly onside, he's a yard offside when the ball comes to him, or he's already made the run and now he's kind of out of space or not in the right area he wanted to be when he does end up receiving it. And I think it just, again, it speaks to like things slowing down and not quite being as sort of vivacious as they've been at Barcelona in years past. So this was a game for me that sort of did show a lot of the vulnerabilities and why I've been wondering, like, but they're still top of the table. Why does everybody want Valverde gone? Or it seems like everybody does. This game was a good reminder of sort of the kind of vulnerabilities or the lack of strength that he's bringing to Barcelona.
It is amazing to complain so much about a team who are top of the league, isn't it? But it's just how it is. That's our level of expectation of this side.
It's a tough life. It's a tough life Barcelona fans have. We should mention one more game, not exactly impactful from a scoreline standpoint. Milan with a 0-0 draw against Sampdoria. Not the result that either team would have been looking for, given that Milan are currently 12th, Sampdoria 16th. Milan 22 points right now. They are at 13 points outside of the Champions League spots. I doubt they're going to really have that as a realistic goal of closing that gap. But if you've got Zlatan Ibrahimovic in your team, maybe you can. He did not get a goal in this one. Ryan, what have you made of Zlatan's return to Milan?
It seems to be very popular. My friend Daniele Amatar, who's an AP reporter in Milan, said the roar was deafening when he was brought on in this game against Samp, so he's getting a good reception. He also, a couple of days ago, played in a friendly at the Milanella, I think at the training ground, against Rodense, who are, I think that's how you say it,
you have
a
to
local
say it just
team.
like that, in fact.
Yeah. I think that's exactly right. And Milan won that friendly 9-0. Zlatan played the first half of that, got a goal and an assist. I watched it. It was exactly what you'd expect from a training ground kind of game. And his goal was a tap-in, and he had a nice assist. And it'll be interesting to see if he can have an impact here. It's obviously a move that a club that he savours and a club that he wants to play for again. And I think he could get a goal or two. What do I know?
That said, when it comes to like clubs that Zlatan cares for and has a deep connection to, it doesn't always necessarily work out that well. Let's talk for a moment about the Zlatan statue, shall we?
Yeah, well, let's hope that Zlatan doesn't buy any shares in Inter Milan, because he could get a similar reception in Italy as he has done in his native Sweden. His statue has been vandalized several times. It's had its nose broken off. It's had things put on it. The worst damage has come now. It's been broken down. It's snapped at the shin. No footballer needs that kind of injury, but it's lying down sideways right now. It's a sad sight to see, and this is just because Zlatan bought shares in a rival club to the team that got him his start. Malmo.
I think it was Hammarby. I can't remember it, but basically the story that, as I understand it, for people who've maybe missed it, is the Swedish FA wanted to erect a statue of Zlatan. I think initially there was talk that they would put it like in the national stadium or whatever their national stadium would be. Instead, it ended up being put in front of the Malmo stadium where Zlatan first played, and I think that was received very well. Malmo fans were excited about that. That coincided, I think, with around the time that he was thinking, there was talk that maybe he was going to go back to Malmo to finish out his career. So all things very rosy and happy. Then he invests in Hammarby. I think he talks about how he wants to make them the biggest club in Sweden or something like that. That certainly does not go over well with Molde, who are now have his statue there while he's talking about how great this other team are. And that is where sort of the animosity comes from, that it's a statue the Swedish FA put in Molde Stadium. It was not the Molde ownership making that decision. And then he goes and backs another team. That is at least somewhat to blame, / mostly to blame for a lot of the vandalism and it eventually being torn down a la a dictator, which is sort of odd. It's sort of odd to see Zlatan in that way.
It did have shades of the dictator statue being pulled down, didn't it? Which is sad. What gets me is, Swedish people, between all the drinking coffee, drinking hard spirits and being fabulously good looking, where do they get time for all this vandalism?
I mean, maybe that's just it. Maybe because their system is such as it is that they have the time to be able to pull down dictator Zlatan statues.
Dictator Zlatan. That's his new name on this show.
There was a government subsidy that allowed them to do it, I'm pretty sure. It's statue. I can't even do fake Swedish enough to be able to come up with a fake word for pulling down a statue all in one go.
Yeah. Well, I'm having an IKEA kitchen fitted right now, so I'll go and get some Swedish words for you and I'll come back to you.
I appreciate that. Good luck with your 7 spare parts that are going to drive you crazy for the rest of time.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And I will actually say, I want you to be able to focus on your kitchen and your kitchen install. So, Ryan, unless you have anything else to talk about, I suppose we could call it a day.
Yeah, maybe. I'm just wondering, the magic of the FA Cup. I saw some magic in the air in my kitchen, but it might just be an asbestos dust floating around my house. I'm not sure.
All right, well,
maybe that's affected my mood today.
If Ryan is not with us next week, then we know that's exactly what it was, but hopefully he will be. But until then, Ryan, thank you very much for taking the time to talk FA Cup and Spain and a little Zlatan with me today.
Always a pleasure, never a chore.